The room was a blur of movement and sound, the hum of voices blending with the steady beat of music. I stood against the far wall, unnoticed, as I always had been. There were no grand gestures of affection, no passionate exchanges, nothing to mark me as important. But for some reason, that night, I felt more like an outsider than ever before. Zara had been acting strangely for weeks. It wasn't anything specific, no glaring signs, no betrayal so obvious it slapped you in the face. It was in the small moments, the absent glance, the way she'd half smile when I made a joke, but never fully laugh. The way she'd get lost in her phone for hours, scrolling, her face flushed in the glow of the screen. But I didn't press it. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, who was I to question her? She was my wife, and I had no reason to doubt her, right? But that night, something felt different. It wasn't just the music or the crowd. It was the way the room felt off, a subtle shift in the air that made me uncomfortable, as if everyone around me was in on something I wasn't. I could feel the eyes on me, the whispers behind my back. It wasn't until the moment I turned to look at her, really looked at her, that I realized just how deep the silence had settled between us. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the way Zara smiled, how her eyes lit up when she spoke to someone else. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like she wasn't mine to hold anymore. Whatever it was, it made me take a step back, literally and figuratively. I distanced myself from her in that moment, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a stranger in my own life. And then, without any warning, it happened. Zara had been chatting with some friends across the room, laughing loudly, the kind of laughter that felt forced. I wasn't close enough to hear what they were saying, but I knew the way she was looking at them. There was something in the way she looked at him. He was one of the friends I had never met, a new face in a sea of familiar ones. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and eyes that locked onto Zara with such intensity that it made my skin crawl. They were standing a little too close, speaking in low tones, their conversation drawing the attention of no one but each other. I stood there, watching them, feeling an unease settle in my chest. Something in my gut twisted. But what could I do? Confront her? Call her out in front of everyone? But I wasn't the type to make a scene. I kept telling myself to ignore it. It wasn't worth it. I was just overthinking things. That's when Zara looked up and saw me. It wasn't a look of surprise or guilt. It wasn't even a look of recognition. No, it was something entirely different. It was a look of relief. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like I had become the thing that was no longer needed. Like she had found something that filled the space I had once occupied. And in that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was indifferent. I stood there, motionless, as she and him, the new guy, exchanged a knowing glance, a look that only they understood. And then, before I could process what was happening, Zara smiled, turned on her heel, and walked toward the dance floor. It was a slow, deliberate move, almost as if she knew I was watching. She didn't look back. I followed them, but not in a desperate way. It wasn't out of jealousy. It wasn't even out of a need for clarity. It was simply because, at that moment, I realized I wasn't part of her world anymore. The man I used to be, the man who was in love, who trusted her completely, he was gone. All that was left was a man who had lost his place. And maybe, just maybe, I had known this was coming for a while now. But there was one thing I didn't expect. As they reached the center of the floor, Zara did something that froze me in my tracks. Without hesitation, she reached out and pulled him close. Her hand slid across his body in a way that made the entire room feel like it had fallen silent, even though the music still blared. It wasn't just dancing. It was intimate. And in that moment, I realized I had been living a lie. The woman I had called my wife was no longer mine. She was someone else's. And it wasn't just that she was with him. It was the way she looked at him, the way she moved with him. It was like they were the only two people in the room, their chemistry undeniable. I wanted to look away. I wanted to leave. But I couldn't. Instead, I did something I didn't expect to do. I walked up to them, calmly, deliberately. They didn't see me coming. They didn't even notice when I stopped just behind them, standing at the edge of the crowd. But I knew they could feel my presence. I knew Zara felt it, because the air seemed to thicken the longer I stood there. And that's when I said it. "What are you two waiting for?" I asked, my voice cutting through the music like a knife. Both of them froze. The room, as if on cue, seemed to pause with them. The music faltered for a brief second. Everyone turned to look, but no one said anything. Zara's eyes met mine, but there was no shock, no guilt, just a strange, almost relieved expression. And in that silence, the world shifted for me. The first words I spoke to her in weeks weren't ones of anger. They weren't words of betrayal. They weren't accusations. They were simply the words that cut through the silence between us, the words that showed I had finally stopped pretending. "What are you two waiting for?" I asked again, louder this time. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about me. It never had been. The moment those words left my mouth, the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Zara froze, her grip tightening on Ethan's arm, but she didn't turn to look at me. It was like she already knew what I was about to say, but she was hoping I would stay quiet, that I would just pretend like everything was okay. But I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I stood there, watching them, waiting for her to say something. Anything, but there was nothing. For a brief, heart-stopping second, I wondered if I had completely misread the situation. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe they were just dancing, just enjoying the night. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This was something else, something I had refused to acknowledge until now. The truth had been staring me in the face for weeks, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Zara slowly turned to face me, her expression unreadable. Ethan, still standing beside her, seemed to sense the tension and took a step back, unsure of what was happening. He looked at her, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. I felt a strange calm wash over me. In that moment, I realized something that shook me to the core. I had been living in the shadow of my own ignorance. I had been so caught up in my own doubts, my own insecurities, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Zara had been pulling away for months, and I had ignored every sign, every hint. I had convinced myself that it was all in my head. But this moment, standing there on that crowded dance floor, watching my wife and another man, shattered everything. Zara's lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes softened, almost like she was apologizing without speaking. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a moment of anger. It wasn't about vengeance. It was a realization, one that made me feel both numb and strangely liberated. I hadn't lost her to Ethan. I had lost her to the idea of something else, something I couldn't offer. And that something had been brewing long before that night. It wasn't about him. It was about me, about what I had failed to see and understand. I had been so wrapped up in keeping everything intact that I had ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface. And Zara had already made her decision long ago. "Do you love him?" I finally asked, my voice softer than I expected. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple question, one that had been eating away at me for too long. Zara looked at me, her face pale, and for the first time, I saw something I had never seen before: fear. Not the kind of fear you see when someone is caught, but the kind of fear you see when someone is confronted with the truth. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath, as if weighing her next words. "Noah," she began, her voice shaky, "it's not what you think. I never meant for it to happen like this." I couldn't help it. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, and I shook my head. "You didn't mean for it to happen? But here we are, Zara. I'm standing here, watching you with another man, and you're telling me it's not what I think?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "It's complicated," she said, but her words didn't hold the weight they once did. They felt empty, like she was saying them because she thought they would fix things. I knew then that nothing could fix it. I could see Ethan standing a few feet away, his eyes darting between us, unsure of how to react. He wasn't part of the equation, not really. I had no anger toward him, not yet, anyway. But Zara had betrayed me, and not just with her actions, but with her silence, with her refusal to acknowledge what was happening until it was too late. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had never felt so exposed, so small, in my entire life. It wasn't about the affair, not really. It was about the realization that everything I had thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. Every moment we had shared, every promise we had made, now felt like a distant memory. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing her. I was losing myself. "You can't keep doing this, Zara," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You can't keep pretending everything's fine when you're slipping away. I see it. I know it. And I'm not going to be part of this anymore." Zara's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped forward, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. "No, not like this," I whispered. I don't know who you are anymore." The room was silent again, the music now a distant hum in the background, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the space that had grown between us, a space I wasn't sure could ever be bridged again. And then, as if on cue, the door opened. A new wave of partygoers entered the room, but it felt like a lifetime had passed in those few moments of clarity. I could hear people's voices and laughter again, but it all felt distant. I was standing at the edge of my own life, watching it unfold in front of me, unable to do anything to stop it. I walked away without looking back. I couldn't explain why I walked away. Maybe it was the shock of seeing her with him, or maybe it was the suffocating weight of the realization that everything I thought I knew about us was a lie. Either way, I didn't stay. I turned and walked through the crowd, ignoring the whispers, the stares, the curious eyes. The noise of the party faded into a dull hum as I made my way to the door. Once outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head, but all I could hear was the sound of my own thoughts, spinning, tumbling over each other. How did we get here? I kept asking myself. How had the woman I married, who used to look at me like I was her world, become someone I barely recognized? I leaned against the cold brick wall, my fingers digging into the rough surface as I tried to ground myself. My mind raced with 1,000 questions, none of which had answers. How long had this been going on? Was it just him, or were there others? The thought of it made my stomach turn. I couldn't even bring myself to think about confronting her again. What would I say? How could I even look her in the eye after everything? Then there was Ethan. I barely knew the guy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. I wasn't angry at him. Not yet, anyway, but something about the way he acted around Zara felt wrong. It was like he knew exactly what he was doing, and worse, he seemed to be enjoying it. I pulled out my phone, the screen illuminating my face in the dark. I didn't want to call her, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know. I had to hear it from her. I tapped her name in my contacts and stared at it for a long moment before pressing the call button. It rang. Once. Twice. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. Hello. Her voice was soft, tentative. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to say. Where are you? I asked, my voice trembling more than I'd like to admit. Are you coming home? There was a long pause, and then she spoke, her words slow and measured, as if she was carefully choosing each one. Noah, I think we need to talk, but not like this. I felt a strange emptiness wash over me. I had expected anger, maybe tears, but this was different. It felt final. Where are you? I repeated, my voice steady now. I wasn't going to break. Not now. At the house, she replied. But Noah, please, just come back when you're ready. We can talk. I don't want you to leave. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to tell her how much she'd hurt me, how everything felt like a lie, but I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to speak. After a long silence, I hung up. The cold night air seemed to press in on me, and for the first time, I felt completely alone. The city around me moved on, people walking past without a care, while I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the thought that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who had been living a lie. I didn't go back right away. I couldn't. The thought of facing her, of seeing Zara's face after what had just happened, was too much. Instead, I walked through the city streets, aimlessly, letting the cold air numb my thoughts. Every street corner seemed like a reminder of what was slipping away, my life, my marriage, my entire sense of who I was. The world felt distant, like I was in a fog, and all I could do was walk, trying to outrun the thoughts that were clawing at me from inside. But eventually, I had no choice. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and I found myself standing in front of our house. It felt strange being there, the place where we had laughed, argued, made plans for the future. Now it was just a house, a building that held echoes of the life we once had, a life I wasn't sure I wanted to return to. I stood there for a moment, gathering myself. I could hear the muffled sounds of the TV inside, the soft hum of life continuing on without me. I reached for the door handle, but my hand faltered. I wasn't sure what I would find when I walked through that door. Would she be there, waiting for me? Or would she be hiding behind some excuse, trying to explain away everything I had just witnessed? I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The house felt colder than it ever had. The silence was deafening. I could see Zara sitting on the couch, her eyes red, like she'd been crying for hours, but she didn't move when I walked in. Her posture was stiff, guarded, like she wasn't sure if she should reach out to me or not. And in that moment, I realized just how far apart we had grown. "Are you going to say anything?" I asked, my voice rough. I wasn't angry, not yet. I didn't have the energy for anger. I was tired of pretending, tired of holding on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. Zara took a shaky breath, her eyes meeting mine. "Noah, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want it to happen like this. I never meant for things to get out of hand." I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Out of hand? Is that what you're calling this now? You think you can just say sorry and we'll move past it?" She flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted them, but I didn't take them back. She deserved the truth, even if it hurt. "I don't know what you want me to say," she continued, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you, Noah. It just happened. Ethan, it's not what you think. I never wanted to fall for him. I didn't want any of this." I stepped closer to her, my heart pounding in my chest. "But you did. You fell for him. You chose him over me, over us. And now, you're sitting here, telling me that it just happened?" She stood up quickly, almost as if the words physically pushed her into action. "Noah, please. I've been confused. I don't know how to explain it. I felt lost, and when I met Ethan, it was like he understood me in ways you didn't anymore. I'm not making excuses, but that's the truth." I took another step toward her, my mind reeling. "So what now? Is this the end? Do I just walk away and pretend like nothing ever happened? Like none of this matters?" She didn't answer immediately. She just stared at me, her eyes full of regret, full of something else I couldn't place. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or if it was something worse, something colder. "I don't know," Zara said softly, "but I don't want to lose you. I don't. I know I've made mistakes, but please, can we try to fix this?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hear the sincerity in her voice, but it was hard. The damage had already been done, and no matter how much she begged, no matter how many tears she shed, I couldn't forget what I had seen, what I had felt. I took a step back, my hands gripping the edge of the couch. "You don't get to fix this, Zara. Not like this. You can't just come back and act like everything's fine because it's not. I'm not sure it ever will be." Her face crumpled in on itself, her shoulders shaking as she began to cry openly. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I had already made up my mind. We were done. There was no going back. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had given everything to, was gone. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. And this time, it wasn't because I was afraid. It was because I was done pretending, done with the lies, done with the silence. As I closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away from her. I was walking away from the person I had been when I was with her. And maybe that was the hardest part. I didn't expect to hear from Zara after that night. I thought that walking away would be the end of it. But life, it seems, had other plans. 3 days passed in silence. I went about my routine, work, meals, sleep, but everything felt distant. Even the smallest moments felt hollow. My apartment, which used to feel like home, now felt like a prison. I spent my evenings pacing, replaying every word, every look. And that's when I found it. It wasn't something I had been looking for. It was one of those things you stumble upon when you least expect it. I was cleaning out an old drawer, sorting through papers, when I saw it. A small envelope, wedged between 2 old receipts. It was unmarked, just a plain white envelope with no return address. My curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a note, written in Zara's handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the words were clear. "I'm sorry I never told you the truth. You deserve more. I've been living a lie. Ethan isn't the first, but he's the one who made me realize how far I've fallen. I don't know what to do anymore. Please forgive me." My heart dropped as I read it. My hands trembled, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about her and Ethan. It was about everything. The years of silence, the distance, the empty words. I had been living in a relationship that wasn't what I thought it was. And Zara had known it all along. I didn't know whether to be angry or numb. I stood there, staring at the note, trying to process the weight of it. But one thing was clear. I had been living a lie. And now, I had the proof. I folded the note back into the envelope and placed it back in the drawer. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I walked into her office the next day. A confrontation? An apology? Maybe even the truth, raw and unfiltered. But what I found instead was nothing like what I had imagined. Zara sat behind her desk, her eyes darting between her phone and her computer screen. She didn't even look up when I walked in. It was like I wasn't even there. For a moment, I wondered if she was pretending not to notice me, or if she just didn't care anymore. My heart pounded in my chest, but I couldn't let her see that. Not now. I closed the door behind me with more force than I intended. The sound echoed in the quiet office, but Zara didn't flinch. She didn't react at all. "Zara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She finally looked up, her eyes locking with mine. The expression on her face was unreadable. "About what?" she asked, her voice almost too calm. Too practiced. I couldn't help but feel a flash of anger. How could she be so composed, so untouched by everything that had happened? I had seen her with Ethan. I had read the note. I knew the truth. But still, she sat there, as if nothing had changed. "The note," I said, stepping closer. "The one I found in the drawer. The one where you admitted everything. Don't act like I don't know what you've been doing." Her face went pale. For a split second, I saw a crack in her mask, a brief flicker of something I couldn't quite place. But just as quickly, she regained her composure, pushing her chair back as if to put distance between us. "That note was meant to be private," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I never wanted you to find that. It's not for you to read." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "Not for me to read? Zara, you've been living a lie for months, and you think I'm the one crossing boundaries?" "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said, her voice softening, almost pleading. I was confused. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice growing more desperate. "Why didn't you come to me when you felt lost? Why did you let it go this far?" She didn't answer right away, and for a moment, the silence between us was suffocating. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, but I refused to look away. I wasn't going to be the one to back down this time. "I didn't know how to tell you," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could fix myself. But every time I tried, I only felt more lost. And then Ethan." She stopped, biting her lip as if she was considering whether to continue. I didn't want to hear about Ethan. I didn't want to know what he had done to her, how he had made her feel things I could never give her. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself from asking. "What about him?" I said, my voice colder than I intended. "Was he the one you turned to when you couldn't face me anymore?" Zara's eyes flickered with something. Regret, maybe, or guilt, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she looked away, as if she couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "It wasn't like that," she said quietly. "I wasn't looking for someone else. But he was there when I needed someone to talk to. And somewhere along the way, it just happened. I didn't plan for it. I didn't want it." I took a step back, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "So, this was just some accident? Some mistake?" My voice was shaking now, and I couldn't hide it anymore. "You didn't plan for it, but it still happened. You let it happen. And now you're telling me you're sorry?" She stood up then, walking over to where I stood. Her face was soft, her eyes pleading. But it didn't matter anymore. Nothing she said could take back the hurt, the betrayal I felt. Nothing could erase the image of her dancing with him, the way she looked at him, the way she wanted him. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Zara said, her voice breaking. "But I want you to understand. I never meant to hurt you, and I hate myself for what I did." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I refused to let her see how much this was tearing me apart. I had already lost her once. I wasn't going to let her have that power over me again. "I'm done," I said, my voice cold and final. "I'm done pretending that everything's fine, done pretending that we can fix this. I'm not the same person I was when I walked into this office." Zara's face fell, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But I couldn't be the one to save her. I couldn't be the one to fix this. I turned and walked out of her office, leaving her standing there, alone. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. It's strange, isn't it? The silence after something like that. You'd think it would be deafening, suffocating even, but instead, it was just empty. Like there was nothing left to say, nothing left to do. After I walked out of Zara's office, I thought the hardest part would be the immediate aftermath. The arguments, the accusations, the blame. But it wasn't. The hardest part was the stillness that followed. The way the hours stretched on with no resolution, no closure. Just nothing. For days, we didn't speak. There was no phone call, no text, not even a passing glance. It was as though we had ceased to exist in each other's world. I kept waiting for her to reach out, for some kind of message, some kind of sign that maybe, just maybe, she regretted what happened. But there was nothing. I spent my days in the same numb routine, pretending like everything was okay. Work felt like a blur, conversations with friends seemed distant, and even the simplest tasks became overwhelming. I was living a life that wasn't mine anymore. I was an actor playing a role I no longer cared about. But as the days passed, something started to shift inside me. I started to ask myself questions I hadn't dared to before. Was I really done? Was I ready to walk away from everything, from her? Or was I just too hurt to see the whole picture? One evening, I found myself sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than it had in weeks, and I couldn't ignore the growing ache in my chest. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but I still missed her. I grabbed my phone, my fingers hovering over her name. For the first time in days, I thought about calling her. Maybe she felt the same way. Maybe she was just as lost as I was. But before I could dial, the phone buzzed in my hand. It was a message from Zara. The words were simple, but they hit me like a punch to the gut. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? My heart raced. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. The words were simple, yet they carried more weight than anything we'd said to each other in weeks. The silence between us had been suffocating, but now there was a chance to break it, a chance to make sense of everything that had happened. I took a deep breath and typed my reply. Yes. Let's talk. I didn't know what would come from this conversation. I didn't know if it would fix everything or just be the final nail in the coffin. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to keep running from the truth anymore. I wasn't going to let our story end in silence, not after everything we'd shared. Later that evening, we met at a small cafe, a place that held good memories, back when things were easier. Zara arrived before me, her eyes looking tired but softer than I remembered. She didn't say anything at first, just gave me a hesitant smile as I sat down. I'm sorry, she said, her voice low. For everything. For the way I hurt you. For the lies. For everything. I was so afraid of losing myself that I lost you in the process. I listened, trying not to let the rawness of her words overwhelm me. I didn't want to be angry anymore, not right now. I wanted to understand. I wanted us to understand each other. I didn't handle it well either, I replied. I wasn't perfect. I saw the signs and ignored them, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. We both made mistakes. She nodded, her gaze never leaving mine. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try. I want us to try again, if you're willing. The air between us felt different now, lighter, less heavy with unspoken words. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew we couldn't just pick up where we left off. But maybe we didn't need to. Maybe we just needed to find a new way forward, together. I'm willing to try, I said, my voice steady. But we have to be honest with each other. No more pretending. No more silence. She smiled, a real smile this time, the kind I hadn't seen in so long. I can do that. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. Things wouldn't be the same, I knew that. But maybe, just maybe, they could be better. As we sat there, talking, truly listening for the first time in months, I realized something important. Sometimes, the hardest moments are the ones that lead to the greatest change. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover what we had, and to grow into something even stronger than before. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone anymore.